Are you confused about your Myers-Briggs type? If so, this video is for you. I want to help you understand why. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why you might be confused about your type. Number 1, tests are inaccurate. Any kind of a quiz, questionnaire, test, instrument, indicator, whatever you might call it, any kind of multiple choice, self-reporting test that you take is going to be inherently flawed for reasons I'll get into. Number 2, type descriptions don't seem to fit you. Type descriptions are also inherently problematic for reasons I'll address. Number 3, you've been given confusing, convoluted theory. There's a lot of theory being floated around online that can easily just end up serving to confuse you more about your type. Number 4, you've been given bad examples. Celebrities being mistyped on the internet is more of the rule than the exception. There are also many people in Facebook groups and forums who have been mistyped, and having inaccurate examples of people of each type can serve to throw off our internal type radar, our intuition. And finally, number 5, you've been given bad feedback. If you've asked people to help you with your type, especially in Facebook groups and public forums, you've probably gotten conflicting and confusing results. So without further ado, let's jump into number 1. Reason number 1 why you might be confused about your Myers-Briggs type. Tests are inaccurate. Now, before I start criticizing tests, I first want to acknowledge that the development of the MBTI was a very important breakthrough. The MBTI popularized a theory of personality based on the work of Carl Jung that's been a huge influence on my life. It's promoted the idea that we should do things that we are well suited for, that we should be doing work that we are designed for. When I was a kid, I used to work construction with my dad, and while I have a good relationship with my dad, I hated working construction. I hated every minute of it. I was raised with the idea that you had to earn a living, particularly through manual labor, and this just didn't seem to work for me. I always had a very deep yearning to be able to use my mind and my creativity. When I discovered Myers-Briggs, it helped me learn how to do that. It gave me a language for being able to understand myself, to be able to understand other people, and to understand where I fit in the grand scheme of things. So if it wasn't for the development of the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or the MBTI, then I wouldn't be making this video. So with that underlying gratitude, I'm going to point out some flaws in the MBTI and in Myers-Briggs tests in general. The first problem with tests is that it's essentially impossible for us to be objective about ourselves. Now, some of us can do this better than others, but nobody can really be objective about themselves. It's always going to be a sort of hall of mirrors. And we're conditioned by different forces, by parents, by society, by culture, etc., to see ourselves in certain ways and to hide certain things from ourselves. Now, when I've written Myers-Briggs questionnaires myself, one of the things that I would do is have couples take the test together. And it was not uncommon to hear people say things like, "What are you talking about? That's not like you at all." The second problem is that all questions are going to have some level of ambiguity to them. No matter how well written a question is, it's always going to have some ambiguity. So, for example, this is an early question from the MBTI in the 1940s. Do you, A, very much enjoy stopping at soda fountains, or B, usually prefer to use your money for other things? Now, this may be a bit of an extreme example of a question that appears a bit silly in retrospect, but it points to something that is an issue with all questions. People of any type could answer either way on that question. The enjoyment of soda fountains is not type dependent. Now, here's a question from the current version of the MBTI. In reading for pleasure, do you A, enjoy odd or original ways of saying things, or B, like writers to say exactly what they mean? Now, I would struggle with this question. I would go back and forth on this because new or odd ways of saying things could be either stimulating or it could be really annoying. And a writer saying what they mean could either be refreshing or it could be boring. So this ambiguity is a problem for the MBTI, even though these questions have been workshopped thoroughly for years. You can imagine if you just take a random test online that this is going to be worse. The third issue with tests is that a lot of non-type related factors are going to affect our answers. The underlying theory behind Myers-Briggs suggests that type is about how our brains are wired and not about behavior. So introverts, for example, could be socially confident and outgoing, and extroverts could be really shy. In fact, I know an extrovert who has agoraphobia, which is the fear of wide open spaces. So it's difficult for this person to leave their home. And you can imagine that they wouldn't answer questions about, say, going to parties the way that the test writer would intend, like an extrovert. They're going to probably test as an introvert. So these non-type related factors that are affecting people's answers, in combination with the other things I've already mentioned, are part of the reason why studies suggest that 50% to possibly even 75% who retake the MBTI after 5 weeks get different results. Now, here are a few more reasons why that might be the case. A person may have an increase or decrease in social confidence. They may have a change of environment, a change in their mood on that particular day, trauma, conditioning, a change of habits, or, say, a pandemic, just to name a few. Okay, the number 2 reason why you may be confused about your Myers-Briggs type is that the type descriptions you read just don't fit you. So when an author writes a description of a Myers-Briggs type, it's important for it to be relatable to people. This, however, presents a problem. In order to write a description that's relatable to the most people, it's going to be very difficult to avoid describing observable behavior and playing to stereotypes. But a lot of people are not going to fit into those stereotypes, and observable behavior within a single type can be quite a bit different. People of the same type can be very different from each other. For example, an INTJ could be a rigid perfectionist or a total slacker. They could be a neat freak, or they could be very messy. They could be consistently on time, or they could be consistently late. They might be a daydreamer. They might be a go-getter. They might be a staunch skeptic, or they could be a spacey mystic. If you don't fit the mold for your type, then you may well read descriptions of your type and find that they just don't fit you. Reason number 3, you've been presented with a lot of confusing theory. It's my opinion that you don't need a lot of complex theory in order to be able to understand your type and for it to make sense. You just have to know what to look for. Unfortunately, there's a lot of confusing theory being passed around, especially online, about things like function loops and subtypes and other modifications of the theory. And some of it may have validity and some of it may not. However, in my experience, the deeper people go down that rabbit hole, the more confused they get. Reason number 4 why you might be confused about your type. You've been given bad examples. And mistyping is very common. In fact, I think most celebrity type listings online are inaccurate. And the problem with that is that bad examples skew our internal type radar. They skew our intuition about type and our perception of types. Now, when I was first trained in Myers-Briggs profiling, I became obsessed with the idea of typing quickly and accurately as possible. And in order to do that, I recognized that I'd need to hone the power of my intuition. I knew that if I had hundreds of accurate examples of each type, that my intuition would be razor sharp. I'd be able to develop a feel for each type that would be both fast and accurate. But I also knew that if I had a few bad examples thrown in, that it would throw the whole thing off. Now, if you're interested in learning how to hone your type radar or typing people in general, you can go to whattype.com/typing to learn more. Okay, finally, reason number 5 why you may be confused about your Myers-Briggs type. You've been given bad feedback. If you've been looking for help on your type, especially if you've been posting about it in public forums like Facebook groups, then you've probably gotten conflicting responses. A lot of this can be chalked up to what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Wikipedia defines the Dunning-Kruger effect as a cognitive bias whereby people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. Now, this is especially prominent in the Myers-Briggs community because type isn't a hard science. You can't verify someone's opinion about type the same way that you could verify, say, the answer to a math problem. It's very easy for people to fall into the trap of feeling like typing people comes naturally to them. The truth is that it's a skill that needs to be earned. In my estimation, it's not something that many people can do well, and no one who I know who can is jumping in to share their opinions on Facebook groups. More often than not, you'll end up with well-meaning people who are very confident that they're right, but they don't agree with each other, which only causes to confuse you further. So that wraps it up. And once again, if you're looking for clarity on your type, if you want to get an answer about your type once and for all, then I encourage you to go to whattype.com/mytype to learn about one-on-one video sessions. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions about your type or anything related to figuring out your type, post your questions in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them the best I can. Thank you.